it's not to show off the new iPad 2, neither it is for for the senator to allocate like $200,000 for the education system, like Maine did, I think last week or so, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, and welcome everybody to our luncheon forum with Senator Curren Price. We are honored to have him here as the speaker today with the theme of Future of California. And he's here to give us hope and just to the business people, the message to hang on and survive in these difficult times, hopefully. There are some business people here who will get this message and relate it to the others here. Curren Price was first elected to the California State Assembly in 2006 to represent the 51st District. I think it covers Hollywood and some parts of Hollywood and USC.
Well, 51st a little further south, the South Bay area.
South Bay area. And also Culver City. It comes currently.
Yes.
I see. And was re-elected by an overwhelming margin to a second term in 2008. After serving one full term in the California State Assembly, Mr. Price was elected in May 2009 to represent the 26th District in the State Senate, which includes a portion of Los Angeles, Culver City, Beverlywood, Hollywood, Koreatown, Ladera Heights, Larchmont, and Lamont Park, View Park, and Vermont Hills. Now, born and raised in Los Angeles, California, Senator Price attended Morningside High School in Inglewood. Is this place where the Boston Celtics player also graduated, or close to that, right? So, and received a scholarship to Stanford University, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science. He studied law at Santa Clara University and graduated in 1976 with a Juris Doctor degree. And throughout his tenure as an elected official, Senator Price has been awarded numerous honors in recognition of his legislation and advocacy on behalf of students, working families, and small businesses. So please help me welcome Senator Price to give a speech.
Thank you, Tello. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, officers, members, friends of the Pacifica Institute, and I'm honored to be your speaker this afternoon. I'm joined by my colleague, Angie English, my able deputy, who also happens to be the elected city council woman in Hawthorne. And so she brings added emphasis and greetings also from that part of the area. I represent the 26th Senate District, as was suggested, and you know, it's a very sprawling area, not really, it starts really not far from here, down on Wilshire. I don't come into USC, the campus, but Cheviot Hills, going back towards the Larchmont area, Hancock Park, Little Ethiopia, Koreatown, Thai Town, the Coliseum, USC, through South Central LA. So a very diverse area, and I think certainly reflects the diversity of our state and our country. 2011, as you know, has been a very difficult time, and especially in Sacramento, as we've been dealing with these budget deficits and required budget cuts. You know, the legislature was forced to make some painful cuts to programs earlier this year, but in reality, for the past 3 years, you know, we've had to cut almost $60 billion from the budget. And unfortunately, those are many of those are in programs that impact the safety net that individuals rely on, those who are poor and the elderly and the youth. The cuts that we've made are going to reverse any progress that we've made in recent years, especially in education, for example. Students that attend our colleges and universities can expect increased tuition costs, fewer courses, making higher education even more inaccessible instead of more accessible. At the community college level, we're going to turn away some 400,000 students this year, and the fees are going to double. These cuts will also result in the closure of more K through 12 schools. That's going to be a shorter school year, massive teacher layoffs, and we're already seeing that. Larger class sizes, fewer career technical education classes, the elimination of summer school programs, and the mere dismantling of arts and social service programs, Again, this is the result of the budget cuts, of the cuts that we're making now, and that we've have made, and that we will have to make in the future. You don't have to look any further than today's headlines to be confronted with the paralysis in Sacramento, the perennial budget deficits, overcrowded classrooms, disturbing dropout rates, the street gangs, perpetual droughts, water shortages, freeway congestion. I know you're saying, well, gee whiz, why are we hanging around, huh? But the future of California is not without its challenges. I think that we're really approaching a pivotal time where we're turning that corner, and we're going to see some better things happening, certainly for the short term and for the long term. California has long been known for its diversity and its tremendous population growth. No other developed region in the world, at least at the size of California, has sustained this kind of growth for as long a period as we have. California is now home, according to the most recent census, home to about 38 million people from all over. And, we're a $1.9 trillion economy. When measured against other countries, we'd be the 8th largest economy in the world. And that's significant. Equally remarkable has been the increasing diversity in the state's population. California is home to large groups of immigrants from more than 60 nations. I mentioned the vast geographic area that comprises the 26th Senate District, some 800,000 citizens, and that's the average size of each of the 40 Senate districts, 800,000. But my area encompasses the largest population of Koreans outside of Korea, largest population of Thais outside of Thailand, largest population of Iranian Jews outside of Iran. We just established a little Bangladesh. We've got little Tokyo and other areas. No ethnic, and of course, in addition to that, we've got some African Americans and some Latinos, and even a few white people left. But no ethnic race, no race or ethnic group really compromises the majority. There is a great diversity. People come from many cultures, and they've contributed greatly to California's growth. And each group seems to make their particular mark on our economy and on our state. At the turn of the 20th century, California's population was about 1.5 million. 1.5 million, and included people from different backgrounds and countries. And in LA, for example, and you can appreciate that, we've got Alvera Street, Little Tokyo, a vibrant Turkish-American community, all contributing to the diversity that makes our state great. Immigrants come to California to find a better life, and they've worked to build towns and create businesses that will help California become the economic leader that it is today. They brought with them rich cultures that included their religion, language, food, music, celebrations, architecture, and ideas. And they have taught us tolerance and acceptance of how we can live and work and prosper together. And I think that really is the message of California and of the future. That's why I'm so optimistic about California's future, for we find strength in our diversity and the power to preserve and overcome obstacles. And we certainly know we have a lot of obstacles, don't we? During the next 20 years, California's population is predicted to reach more than 46 million, adding about 500 new residents every year. That's equivalent to the city about the size of Long Beach, if you can imagine that. LA County alone is expected to grow to about 11.5 million residents, 11.5 million residents by 2025. Increased population growth will bring new demands on our infrastructure and public services, including education, transportation, corrections, housing, water, health, and certainly the welfare of our citizens. At the same time, we're in the midst of a slow economic recovery, and the state's unemployment rate hovering around 12%. Now, that's the highest that it's been in a long time. California's educational system will play a pivotal role in our state's economic recovery and economic future. But that system is also facing a crisis bigger than anything we've ever faced before. These unprecedented cuts are changing the face of education for an entire new generation of school kids. educational programs have been cut to the bone. In far too many cases, schools have been asked to do more with less. In order to improve the state's economic well-being and ensure that California's children are equipped to succeed in the 21st century, we need policies that will help the state's school systems maintain and build on recent improvements. And although the current fiscal situation makes it difficult for us to make these investments at the present time, we should nevertheless start to plan for the future. We have to prepare for the future. We must continue to increase and improve the use of data, for example, in schools, to effectively assess student, teacher, and school performance. This data will be useful for educators and policymakers to improve our schools, make informed decisions regarding instruction and curricula, and to enable school systems to better track students and to determine their progress. We must also start to invest in the development of a high-quality preschool system. Results show us that early and high-quality interventions are critical to a child's success, and that investments in pre-kindergarten programs can produce both short and long-term benefits that exceed the costs. For every public dollar invested in these programs, taxpayers get $7 back in terms of increased wage and tax revenue and reduced costs associated with welfare, public safety, and incarceration. Currently, about half of all eligible children receive subsidized early care and education. We simply have to do more to open up the opportunities for families to enroll their kids in these preschool programs. That's why I'm on record as fully supporting a universal preschool. And I hope I'm going to continue to be an outspoken advocate on these issues until that goal is really realized. And there are a number of programs that are pushing in that direction, but I think it should be a policy, a firm policy. By almost all measurements, California has fallen behind other states in K through 12 funding. And it's true that funding isn't the only criteria to create good schools, but it's an important one. In California, too many schools simply do not receive enough resources from the state to enable all students to meet California's academic performance. As it relates to our low-performing schools, we need to take a more proactive approach in targeting our most troubled schools and provide them with the expertise, with the resources needed to improve the quality of education and to help turn them around. Frequently the schools who need it most are the ones who get the least, and something's wrong with that. Last year, I supported President Obama's Race to the Top legislation because I believe that we need to take drastic action to improve the state of education in our state and in our nation. As chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, I conducted hearings on the state of our public schools, and we solicited ideas and thoughts from educational experts and other stakeholders around the state on how California can improve its schools. We need to make sure that the best teachers are teaching in our worst schools, and we need to reward those schools that are doing the difficult work of turning around low-performing students. This year, I've introduced Senate Bill 511, which would create a comprehensive grant program targeting our state's lowest-performing schools. These schools would be eligible to receive additional state support if they agree to implement the best practices and promising programs on their campuses that have been successful in other places. The State Department of Education will be required to make information about these proven strategies available on the department's website. The bill has been referred to the Senate Education Committee, where it's awaiting a hearing. And as a state, I don't think we can any longer sort of push these issues back. We have to bring them up and put them on the agenda. I believe that this kind of legislation, and it's supported by a number of community educational organizations, I think this is one step in that direction. In California, we have an antiquated and broken school finance system. An equitable funding formula would acknowledge not just the differences in students, but also the cost differences amongst districts. Beverly Hills is a little different than some other districts. We must reform the system and move towards developing a student-weighted formula that is centered on the needs of the student. California policymakers have a vital role to play in ensuring that the future prosperity of our state and the state's K through 12 system is maintained and enhanced. And I think in many ways that's going to be the key to our prosperity. These changes will not come easy. Spending on education is the biggest ticket item in the California state budget. Consequently, education funding is an obvious target when the budget must be cut. The current fiscal crisis is no exception. School districts around the state are cutting programs and policies. You may have family and friends that have received notices. Certainly you may have kids in schools or family members in schools that are suffering because of these cuts. K through 12 education is not the only area of the state budget that's been hit hard. Recent proposed cuts in higher education funding have led both the California State University and the University of California to reduce admissions. Even through tough economic times, we must make education our highest priority, I think, and we have to continue to invest in a quality system. And really, I think our future depends on that. At every level, K through 12, and in four-year schools and beyond. The state's commitment to funding higher education has declined. In 1980, 17% of the state budget went to higher education. Today, that figure is, what do you think it's today? In 1980, it was 17%. 10%.
The correctional system gets more.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Shortchanging education for quick budget fixes is short-sighted, and I think it's going to seriously undermine the state's economy. And, you know, in many respects, that's the price we're paying now, you know, because in the past we sort of kicked the can down the field. Oh, we'll solve that crisis later, we'll solve it later, and all of a sudden it's later is here. State legislators and other policy workers must work together to plan and implement strategies that will strengthen and revitalize California's education system. I'm hopeful, but remain guarded, that we can soon reach an agreement between Republicans and Democrats on behalf of all Californians to solve this budget crisis and to invest in our future. I'm particularly encouraged by remarks made by a key Senate Republican that suggests that there may be support among some of his Republican colleagues for a temporary extension of the current sales income vehicle tax over the next several months until a ballot measure can be put before voters. And as you may recall, that was the dilemma that Governor Brown has faced over the past several months. We have a budget deficit of about $30 billion. We made $15 billion in very hard cuts. The plan was to make up the other $15 billion with the extension of taxes that we're already paying, but we'd extend those taxes out another 4 years. The Republicans took a pledge: we don't want any new taxes, and the way you solve the budget problem is to just cut these programs, eliminate the programs. And so their failure to reach an agreement prevented that measure from going on the ballot in June. So there will be a ballot measure, probably in November. But in the meantime, what's going to happen to these programs? Severely cutting and or eliminating services for persons with disabilities and seniors and kids, I don't think is a reasonable solution either morally or economically. Investments in early childhood education, provisions that allow persons to remain in their homes instead of being placed in an institution, and services that assist persons to live independently and contribute to their community provide long-range savings and economic benefits. And I think it's just the right thing to do. Another major challenge facing our state is a growing gap between the skill level of California workers and the demands of the labor market and the economy. A recent report by the Public Policy Institute of California indicated that California needs approximately 1 million more Bachelor of Arts degrees by the year 2025. This gap between the demands of the economy and the supply of college-educated workers also poses a threat to the state's economic future. Other studies indicate that more than half of all new jobs created in the 21st century will require some level of college education. Currently, state public institutions of higher education award slightly more than 100,000 bachelor degrees each year, and private institutions about 50,000. To meet the projected demand by 2025, the state would need to immediately increase the number of BAs awarded by almost 60,000 a year, about 40% above current levels. Over the past few decades, workers with a college degree have fared well in California's economy, but those with a high school diploma or less have fared less well. Under the current downturn, high school graduates are more than twice as likely as college graduates to be unemployed. If employers see that California does not have the highly educated and trained workers, they will be less likely to establish businesses here. Fewer high-paying jobs mean less personal income tax revenue for the state, creating a revenue shortfall that will affect funding for critical items like schools and transportation. And again, just to kind of put this in some context, before we started making all these cuts, we had income. The state had income generated from sales tax, income taxes, revenue taxes, approaching about $120 billion. Currently, we're bringing in about $80 billion. And so therein is the gap, and therein is the need for a variety of other reasons to make these cuts. If employers see that California does not have enough highly educated workers, they're going to be less likely to invest in California to everyone's detriment. Closing the skills gap is a huge challenge, but with relatively modest improvements in college attendance and college completion, again, California, I think, is on the verge of making some real changes here. Unless decision makers take steps to improve the state's K-12 and higher education systems, however, the long-term economic prospects for California and for the state are going to be affected, negatively affected. Unemployment rates will be higher and wages will be lower in the future with less educated adults. California's future is very much aligned to the state's diverse industry sectors as we remain a world leader in agriculture, information technology, entertainment, government, biotech, and tourism. Even our manufacturing sector remains strong, even with this downturn. A few days ago, Governor Brown signed far-reaching legislation, Senate Bill 2X, requiring California utilities by 2020 to obtain a third of their electricity from alternative renewable energy sources, such as wind or solar or other green. Within this legislation, California is taking a giant step towards nurturing the rise of alternative energy as a way of meeting the needs to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. While some have feared this bill would worsen the state's business climate and the consumer costs, an equal number of economists and other experts have assured us that the new policy is not only going to improve our environment, but also help stimulate the economy. And I think we have to give that a try. California has a long history of combating global effects of climate change and our reliance on fossil fuels. In 2004, some of you may recall, California adopted the first ever greenhouse gas emission standards for passenger cars, and by 2004. These standards have reduced emissions from new passenger vehicles by approximately 30%. The federal government has set a standard equivalent to California's as a goal to achieve emissions reductions by the year 2016. Senate Bill 375, which was signed into law in 2008, aims to reduce emissions by integrating investments in land use and transportation. This bill provides incentives to encourage regional transportation planning agencies and local governments to develop ways to reduce passenger vehicle trips. And of course, here in Southern California, we all are wedded to our cars, aren't we? An executive order also calls for emissions to be reduced to 80% below 1990 levels by the year 2050. Reductions of this magnitude are needed on a global scale to really stabilize the Earth's climate. California now faces a twofold policy challenge. One, finding the least expensive ways to reduce emissions, and two, preparing for the climate change that are expected even if the emissions are successfully reduced. At least 3/4 of California's cities and counties, encompassing more than 90% of the state's population, are taking measures to address this change. In many instances, these measures are also prompted as ways to reduce energy costs and to promote broader sustainability goals. Now, California is not alone in tackling this global issue, but our actions are crucial because we set an example, not only for other states, but for other countries. To be effective, the state must continue to forge new strategies, even though the nature and timing
of climate change is uncertain, and global efforts to reduce emissions may or may not be successful. It means we still need to be moving forward in this area. California needs to prepare for the effects of climate change, and in doing so, keeps the door open for new green initiatives and green jobs. Work must be done to prepare California for this new era, but I think our state has proven itself to be up to the task. California's future is bright and promising. And finally, for the first time in more than a generation, we are investing in our transportation infrastructure with development of high-speed rail, a system that certainly has been proven effective in other parts of the world, Europe, Asia, and it's time in California. As the chair of the Senate Select Committee on Procurement, I've had hearings around the state to ensure that small businesses, as well as women and minority-owned businesses, are given an opportunity to successfully compete for state contracts relating to the high-speed rail project. Again, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to be invested over the next 10 years. I've also introduced legislation that will level the playing field for California's micro businesses and ensure that the local workforce benefits by the new jobs that are being created. Senate Bill 734 requires at least 25% of the project's workforce be drawn from local communities, and that an additional 2.5% preference be granted to California's micro businesses. And micro businesses are those businesses, I think, with revenues under $10 million and fewer than 100 employees, which are most small businesses. While the months and years ahead are not going to be without challenges, the great state of California, I think, is well on its way towards rebirth. Rebirth that can be attributed to the strength that comes from its diversity and the perseverance that can be found in the people who make up the population. After all, I think we are the greatest asset that California has. Not the weather, not the beach, you know, but our human capital. Early California was developed by the ingenuity of immigrants who came to this place with the hopes of making a better life and future for their children. Nothing has changed over the years. We still desire a bright future for our children, and our actions will dictate whether or not we're able to make good on that promise. And with that, I thank you for your attention.